The San Francisco 49ers front office speaks about their draft haul. John Lynch, some interesting comments about kicker Jake Moody, and Adam Peters on why Jair Brown was the guy to move up for in the third round of the NFL draft. All that and more come up on today's Locked On 49ers.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On 49ers. Brian Peacock and Eric Crocker with you as always at BD Peacock at Eric_Crocker. Thanks everybody for making us your first listen here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And of course, on this Winky Wednesday, let's bring on today's guest, Mr. Nicholas Winkler.
Nicholas Winkler, come on down.
Wink, what do you think? Warriors down 3-1. Can they make this one happen like they did the last series and maybe win a road game here against the Lakers like they did against the Kings?
Oh, yeah, they've shown all year they're a fantastic road team. I don't see why not, right? It's going to be easy. Dubs in 7, baby.
So this might be the end of the road. Might be the end of the dynasty there, thanks to a guy by the name of Lonnie that I didn't know existed.
Who?
Is it kind of hypocritical for fans to complain about how the Warriors have kind of played on the road in LA, blame the refs, but y'all play bad on the road all year? You're literally the worst road team in basketball. It started off very rocky against the Sacramento Kings, lost 2 road games there, and then they act so surprised and then blame everybody else for their losses. When It's like, y'all play like crap this whole time on the road.
I was surprised. Yeah. Go ahead, Wink.
I don't think they're actually watching the game, Croc, because, Wiggins bad, Poole bad, Clay bad. Who played well for the Warriors besides Steph Curry, right?
He missed a lot. What was he like?
Yeah.
3, 4, 11, 12.
The triple-double was great, but he missed a lot of shots. You're exactly right. Nobody played extremely well. When Gary Payton II is your third leading scorer, you got some issues.
He wasn't in the starting lineup, though. All right, we got to get into our 49ers conversation, but I know the listeners been seeing Croc with his Lakers gear. I had to throw, if you're watching this on YouTube, I had to throw the City Warriors headband on just to represent and counteract the nonsense that Croc always has going on in the background. Really quick here, and this
might need you to take your headband and go to whatever, was it Chase Center?
Yeah.
And maybe you need to suit up.
There we go.
Dude, I got 1 quarter in me. I can go Lonnie Walker for 1 quarter if the Warriors need it and hit some shots. A guy at the gym the other day called me Kevin Love, and I'll take that all day long. Although, against people that are 5'9" at the gym, I look like Kevin Love, but I'm the same height as Curry and Jordan Poole, so I don't think that would work at the NBA level.
Kevin Love is actually still kind of good. I was watching that Heat game before the Laker-Warrior game, and Kevin Love was knocking down threes, and I'm like, hey, he's still good. A lot of gray hairs, but he's good.
All right, we got to talk. Warriors in trouble 3-1. Let's talk a little bit about the 49ers here and some of the comments the front office has made about the 49ers draft class. One quick note here about basketball, and this is what's strange. So, a lot of fans coming at you, Croc. Warriors fans, of course, that like the 49ers. There's a lot of Lakers fans that like the 49ers as well. And that's a strange pairing, right? 49ers and Lakers. To me, it feels somewhat strange. But one thing I learned today, Croc, about you that's even stranger than that is that you are a USC football fan, but a UCLA basketball fan. What the hell is that? My guy's confused over here.
Okay. Look, when it comes to college sports, I didn't go to those schools, right? If I maybe grew up in that area and I went to USC, then UCLA would 100% be there's no way, right? But as I grew up, it was I grew up watching the O'Bannon twins and Toby Bailey, and I really liked him on the basketball court. And then in football, it was just it was kind of whatever. I like a lot of different teams, Miami, and Ed Reed and Antero Roll and those guys. But also, how could you not like Reggie Bush and all of them? So for football, I really just more of a Pac-12 fan. I kind of hitch my wagon to USC when they were bad, by the way. But I kind of just root for Pac-12, to be honest. Because, and this is why, when you go to school in the South and you hear how much they disrespect West Coast football, it made me like, oh, we're going to show you. And any of these guys just be good. Oregon, USC, UCLA, like just somebody be good in football. Any of y'all. So it's really more of that, to be honest.
All right, so it's not Croc being a front runner; it's Croc representing the West Coast.
Representing the West Coast. Now, with my pro teams, that's diehard. Giants, 49ers, Lakers. I mean, those have been my team since I could remember. But with the college, it's kind of like whatever. I mean, I root for you, cool. You know, I don't sit there and watch UCLA basketball. You know, like they make it to the tournament. Okay, I'll watch it, cool. But I mean, I always have been a UCLA basketball fan, but I don't watch any of their games until the tournament. Football is different. I'll watch USC, but I really do root for everybody in the Pac-12.
Hey, Wink, where would you rank Sam Darnold in the history of San Francisco 49ers football throwers?
Greatest of all time, clearly.
Really? Number one? First of all, this whole conversation that, we're calling back Matt Mayoko from last week when he said on the radio waves that maybe Sam Darnold is the best thrower of the football that the 49ers have had. And look, and that's disrespectful to a couple of Hall of Famers, but really disrespectful to Jim Druckenmiller. I can't believe nobody's bringing him up. Because if you want to talk about just arm and throwing the ball, he's had the best arm the 49ers probably have ever had. And nobody brings him up. You know why? Because he was a bad quarterback. So, and Mayoko wasn't saying anything about how good of a quarterback Sam Darnold is. So he got, I think, some unnecessary heat for that. But at the same time, like, I don't think Darnold's a better thrower than Trey Lance even. So, like, that's even, let's not stretch it too far. I get Sam Darnold was drafted 3rd overall, but so was Trey Lance. And Sam Darnold's grandfather was the Marlboro Man, and he's got broad shoulders. He's a little athletic, and he came from USC. It's like, dude, he's not that talented that he should be getting so many chances with so much bad tape. But he is a talented guy. But it's like, let's not go too far.
I think it
just seems like a really weird thing to say.
Part. That's why. It's people, they keep nitpicking at Trey's mechanics, and with Sam Darnold, you're not going to nitpick at his mechanics. So on top of the ability to make certain throws and the off platform, the on the move, like all those things, and have more zip. And when if you were just to watch highlights of his throws, you would see like high level throws, tight window, down the field, drive throws, down the field. You see all those on the move, 60-yard touchdown run that he had one time. I mean, you'd see all those things to where it's like, okay, talented, really good arm. But Trey is a better, just the throws that he can make at more of an elite high level, he can do it. It's just, I guess the consistency with both of those has been off.
Right. And when it comes to a guy like Darnold too, he may have a great arm, right? He may be able to put great spin on the ball, put it where he wants to in practice, or, when it didn't fully matter. When he's been in the pros, you haven't seen it, right? He's seeing ghosts out there. It's like I coach Little League. And so I'm out there with some of these kids, right? And they're warming up, and I'm like, dang, that kid's got a great arm. Like, we're doing practice. He's throwing it to first every time. Like, he's the only kid that can do it. And then the game happens. Ball's hit to him, and he throws it like, way over the dude's head into the stands. And it's like, these guys do it when it really matters. And, we're talking about a guy like Sam Darnold. He has never proven that he can. He's had a couple of good games here and there, but his overall tape in the pros, it doesn't look like he's a very good thrower of the football.
When the 49ers, somebody in the 49ers front office, Ian Rappaport didn't say who, but he said he got pushback from someone in the building when he was talking about Sam Darnold potentially being the starter if Brock Purdy's not ready. Basically, like, the pushback was, why are you not giving Trey Lance any credit for what he could be, right? Do you think that there's too much writing off of Trey Lance right now, Wink, from people who just haven't seen him enough? Because it's really what happens with prospects, and it's really unfair to a lot of guys. It's kind of unfair to Sam Darnold because I don't want to sound like I'm crushing him all the time on the podcast. He's got some bad tape and he hasn't been a good player, but it's more like, why are you giving this guy so many chances and giving him credit just because you've seen him play poorly, right? And it's like when a prospect is drafted in the first round, within the next 2 years, he's either worth everything and you couldn't possibly trade for him, or he's worth nothing. And we just saw a former number 3 pick cornerback get traded for a 5th round pick, right? From just a couple of years ago. So it's like, and it's one of the things that happens with fan bases. Now, I don't want to create this atmosphere of like, you have to choose, because we've gone through this with Jimmy Garoppolo, and it's like, I don't want to see a team Purdy versus team Trey Lance versus team, if people want Jimmy back, team Jimmy's probably not going to die, versus team Sam Darnold, right? It's just like, dude, these guys they are what they are. Let's watch it and let it play out, because it's weird that people are just so ready and almost like want to write somebody off. They're like, oh, good, I can write this guy off now, even though they were buying his jersey 2 years ago.
I think it's one of those situations where it's a long off season, right? And you don't want to drop clickbait out there as often as you can, but that is a thing, right? Where somebody's like, oh, I got it, dude. I'm gonna say Sam Darnold is gonna beat out Trey Lance. Watch how many clicks I get. Watch how sports radio just explodes over something like this, and it did. It really turned into like, wow, really, this man. And people are writing off Trey Lance because he hasn't been able to stay on the field. And it's unfortunate. We want to see Trey Lance on the field. I want to see what Trey Lance can bring to this 49ers organization, what he can do in this Kyle Shanahan offense, when he can stay healthy. I'd love to see it. But maybe it's also a thing where you're building up your guys, right? You're saying, yeah, he could beat out Trey Lance. He could be the starter, because let's be honest, he could. He could come into camp, do everything right, and win the starting job. Guys do it in the NFL. It doesn't happen a lot. But it's not like Trey Lance has, all this behind him where it's like, look at all this stuff I've accomplished in the NFL. He doesn't. We want it to happen. As a 49er fan, I definitely want to see it happen. But if Sam Darnold beats him out and he's the starting quarterback week 1 for the 49ers, I'm going to be rooting for Sam Darnold because he's wearing, the gold and scarlet.
I mean, even let's look at like Zach Wilson in that situation with going to get Aaron Rodgers. They might talk about it like, oh, Aaron Rodgers, Hall of Famer, of course you go and get him if you have an opportunity, right? And I'd probably love for the 49ers to do it. But Zach Wilson has a lot more tape out there than Trey Lance, and a lot of bad tape. Mm-hmm. And he doesn't even get just the complete writing off like Trey, who hasn't been able to finish back-to-back games. So if you just say, well, he can't even finish back-to-back games, and that's why he's a bust, then I get it. But based on the small sample size and the complete writing off of him to the point where Sam Darnold's going to beat him out, I think that's a little, I hate to say unfair, but it's a little weird to me. And I believe people, they strongly believe that. I don't even think that's a clickbait take by them. I think that's what they believe based on the information in their head that they've gathered with this situation. They truly believe Sam Darnold is just a better quarterback than Trey Lance.
I think a lot of it is that the organization hasn't done a good job of propping him up and publicly, saying really good things about him and having his back. So that's on the organization too, partly. And so, everyone, whether it's reporters or fans, they're going to take the lead of the organization. We're like, okay, if your official stance on Trey Lance is, oh yeah, well, maybe we'll listen to some offers. That's not what you want to hear about a guy you just drafted number 3 overall that is your franchise quarterback, And so I think you could point to the organization in that regard. Speaking of the organization, they have spoken about their most recent draft class. Some comments on Moody, some comments on Jair Brown from John Lynch and Adam Peters coming up next. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers is sponsored by BetterHelp. It's so easy to get caught up with what everyone else needs from you and not really take the moments you need throughout your day, throughout your week to take care of what you need from yourself. If you've ever had trouble spending time on yourself because of your busy life, because of work, because of your family, you're taking care of everything all the time, and you're never able to help yourself and spend so much time on other people and balance that out, have trouble balancing that out, or don't even try to balance it at all because it's 100% for everybody else and never for you. When you spend all that time giving and not helping yourself, you can really feel stretched thin and burned out. And that's where therapy can help give you the tools to find more balance in your life so you can keep supporting others without leaving yourself behind. If you've ever thought about giving therapy a try BetterHelp. It's entirely online. designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist, and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Sometimes it can take a couple therapists to really, hit it off and really feel like that is the therapist that you want to speak to every week and check in with every week and make sure you're hitting the points you need to in your life. Find more balance in your life with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. I want to start with,
before we move on, hold on real quick. I just saw something really great. We're talking about the draft, right? We're talking about Trey Lance and not giving up on him too soon. Great tweet from Matt Burrows just recently. I don't know if you guys saw it. And I'm sure you guys have heard this stat before. Maybe you haven't. I hadn't heard it. 10 quarterbacks that were drafted in the draft this year are older than Trey Lance.
Yeah, he just turned. I think he turned 23 today.
Yeah. He just turned 20. I remember after the draft, he wasn't even 21. He couldn't even drink and celebrate draft night when he got drafted. He had to wait a week or two after the draft before he turned 21. And 20 is really young to be drafted. And I just saw next year's top 10 prospects for the NFL draft, and he's younger than a handful of those guys too.
That's wild.
I have a question on him. I know we're moving on to this new draft class, but I saw a tweet, and I kind of heard this comparison thrown out there a little bit before, but the way this guy worded it, and I just saw it today, I thought it was very relevant to 49ers and Trey Lance situation. And y'all let me know if you see any parallels here. But Rashad Phillips on Twitter says, the drafting of James Wiseman set Golden State Warriors back 3 to 4 years. His development was too slow for what the Golden State Warriors were banking on, so they were forced to bail on their kid. Their thin interior has caused a ton of stress for their perimeter players to mask over a glaring hole. The hybrid post position is the new age post player in which the Lakers have in the AD. Wiseman will be a terrific player, but his timeline wasn't aligned with the Golden State's deadline. Position roster construction is key. So essentially what he's saying is, hey, this is a guy that has a lot of talent, but the development of Wiseman didn't fit the championship hopes for the Warriors. And I read that, I'm like, that sounds a lot like the 49ers situation with Trey Lance, where, year one, it was hard to play him because, like, man, we got one winning season in 4 years. We got a terrific roster. We got to win. Then Brock Purdy comes in after the injury and is like, oh, man, 8 games? Okay, cool. Because we got to win. And then the development of Trey Lance keeps getting pushed off more and more because of where the 49ers are. Do y'all think that has anything to do with it? Or do you see any parallels there?
Yeah,
absolutely.
I think that's well said, Croc. Yeah, that's right on par, right? I mean, but the only difference I think would be Wiseman. Wiseman did have an injury as well too in there, so I could definitely.
That slows the development and doesn't give you time to figure out the player to figure out where he fits in with the team. And you're trying to win, and now there's an unknown, and there's no time for unknowns after a year or two as well. So there's a ton of parallels, and there have been for a while with James Wiseman and the Warriors and Trey Lance with the 49ers. Absolutely. Because of how young they were, how little they played. Wiseman played like 3 college basketball games and then got suspended for some weird, like, recruiting violation or whatever it was. I can't remember what it was. So there's a ton of, their careers are so similar. It's eerie, and they were drafted high and they're so talented. And we'll find out. We still don't know about either player, and they're still talented and they're still young. So we'll find out what they end up becoming. So the evaluations might have been right originally, but the plan was bad, or the team didn't realize how hard it was going to be to follow the plan when they made that draft pick. And so, and I still have hopes for both players, and I think they're both good young dudes. And so we'll see. And it looks pretty good with the Pistons, right? For Wiseman, once he got traded, because he got the time to play and he was just playing, and that's all Trey Lance needs is just to play. And he might not even get that this year with the 49ers.
It might just be bad luck too, right? I mean, both guys getting hurt. You kind of take a huge step back when you get hurt. You're not there to take those steps forward or for the organization to see what you can do if you're not around. Best ability is availability, and both those guys missed a lot of time.
And unlike football, basketball, even if that happens, there's other guys that can kind of fill that role. And I guess for the Warriors, it's some of the younger guys like a Jordan Clarkson, who different roles, but just a young player contributing. And then you look at, the 49ers and, okay, you got Brock Purdy. Now, with Jordan Poole, did I say Clarkson? But Jordan Poole, the fans have switched. I think we've seen this with the 49ers as well. The fans you're like dead to them. Jordan Poole is dead to Warrior fans right now because he's having a bad series or bad playoffs.
Yeah. Oh, it happens so fast. It happens so fast. We're seeing it with Javon Kinlaw as well, right? Everyone's like super excited about Kinlaw. Everyone loved Kinlaw last offseason, right? He came in great shape. He had that one really good rep against the Vikings in the preseason game, I think it was. Everyone's like, oh, here's the year. Javon Kinlaw knew it. He's going to be amazing. And then he gets hurt again, and it's not really a big factor. And everyone's like, oh, what a bust of a pick. Terrible pick. I hate Kinlaw. Like, it's crazy. It's like you got to chill, first of all, fans. It's not all or nothing. There's gray area with all this. There's gray area with Trey Lance. There's gray area with all these draft picks. And we're seeing that as well, Croc, with the drafts and some of our draft evaluations and people pushing back. And they're like, man, Croc, you're too negative about some of your draft evaluations. And we're like, have you seen draft hit rates? Go back and look 2 years. Matt Williamson and I on the Peacock and Williamson, make sure you're subscribed up, by the way. We just looked back at the 2021 draft class in the first round, and we're projecting what those fifth-year options might look like. And the 2020 draft class, where teams just decided on all the fifth-year options, Niners had 2 picks. They picked up the fifth-year option for Brandon Ayuk. They declined the fifth-year option on Javon Kinlaw. Both easy decisions. Out of 32 first-round picks, only 12 fifth-year options were picked up. That's in the first round. So you want to talk about hit rates, like you go beyond the first round, and it's even worse than a coin flip. So there's so much gray area, and some players are valuable role players, but man, it's very unlikely that every team just drafts 7 Hall of Famers every year. That's the way it is. But you've got to, and this is why I do this, and this is why I like being an analyst. And Croc, I feel like you're the same way and wired a similar way when we're doing our evaluations and breakdowns. Like, we love the gray area. We live in the gray area. We're telling you the reality of what's happening. You don't just go, great player, terrible player. Next guy, great, nope, terrible, no. Like, everybody's in the gray area. We got to live life there because that's where we exist.
And find what's the path for them to be out of that gray area.
Or just a little further on one direction of the gray, like a little bit this way, a little bit this way.
Ronnie Bell. I'm not as high on Ronnie Bell as other people, right? Where I'm not high as all, but we still kind of outlined the path to where he could be on the 53-man roster. It could have some level of success and what that might look like. And it just might be a different path. It might be more of a special teams path for him specifically, So there's that aspect of it as well.
No doubt. I want to get next to the GM and the assistant GM, John Lynch, Adam Peters, talking about Jake Moody, Jair Brown, and the rest of the 49ers draft class, especially the Moody stuff, which is not only a kicker in the third round, but how they're treating their third round kicker. And I think we talked a little bit about the organization failing Trey Lance in some ways. They might already be doing that with their third round kicker next. Thanks everybody for making Locked On 49ers your first listen every day. Shout out to all the everydayers. Tomorrow's episode, Croc and I getting back into the NFL draft, breaking down all of the 49ers draft prospects and the undrafted players that we're excited to see in camp for those 2023 San Francisco 49ers. Okay, let's start with John Lynch. He said about Jake Moody, he was on with at KNBR talking about the 49ers draft class. And I'm just listening to, even from the phone call, the first interaction with the 49ers and Jake Moody after they drafted him. Kyle Shanahan's on the phone. He's like, well, we took a kicker. We didn't really want to, so you better be good, kind of thing. It was like, what? Okay, that was a weird phone call for a first conversation with the guy, letting him know you're going to draft him, right? And then John Lynch was on the air at KNBR, and his quote was, I'm pulling up his quote right now. He said, quote, about Jake Moody, I think you know that if you're taking a kicker that high, believe me, we weren't doing cartwheels over it. I think we'll be doing cartwheels if he's the guy we think he is. I mean, talk about putting more pressure. He's already going to have huge pressure from the fan base because you're drafted that high. Anytime a kicker is drafted high, and fans are already disappointed. I was disappointed seeing a third-round kicker. Like, you really want to do that? Look at the hit rate of kickers being drafted in the NFL, and most kickers that are good are usually in their 30s. And he might have been the best kicker in the draft, but the best kicker in the drafts past haven't worked out either. But beyond that, just hearing how they're talking about him publicly is like, geez, give this guy a confidence boost, because that's the number one thing you need to kick in the NFL is that confidence to go up there and make the kick. And it seems like they're putting unnecessary amounts of pressure on the guy.
He's like, yeah, we drafted you because we think you're the best, but if you don't turn out to be Tucker from Baltimore,
Yeah.
You better be the best kicker ever from day one. Have you ever heard someone draft a guy and immediately go on the air and be like, yeah, well, we weren't super excited about making that pick, but we pretty much had to. I mean,
we talk about them being a little too honest sometimes. And I feel like the way they word things, we talked about the support for Trey Lance, right? It's just like whatever. And I understand it, right? You're kind of whatever. Hey, we got Brock Purdy, so whatever happens with Trey, we're fine. But still kind of instilling the level of confidence in the guy you put a lot of capital in. And same with the kicker. Like for a third round, like that's a lot of capital for a kicker, even though you have 3 third-round picks at that time. But you draft them, and then everything that you're saying in the way it's coming off is just like, hey, we'll see. And you talked about the confidence. I've heard it be compared to like a golf swing. Y'all play golf, I don't, but I hear sometimes with your golf swing, you can just kind of almost like a shooter, where the shooter's just he has to find his shot. And I hear it's like that with a kicker as well, but a lot of it's mental, and same with like the golf swing. So I don't know if there's any parallels y'all see to that, but if you can get in it, can you get in your head mentally with a swing? And do you think that's similar to a kicker? Because you can be, when the kicker it only takes a couple misses for people to start looking at you funny.
Oh, no doubt. When you're golfing, there's like you think you're hitting it good on the driving range, you get out on the course, and all of a sudden you just can't stop doing something with your swing, and you cannot find it. And you're in your own head, and everything starts to collapse. And that's not with a stadium of people watching you with it on the line. I can't imagine like going to, kicking a field goal for a game winner and what that feels like. And, and you need the snap and the hold and everything else on top of it. Or, trying to make a golf shot in some of these like little like stadium looking holes where it's a par 3 and there's everyone in like watching you make this golf shot. Like I have a hard time as it is, because I don't want to kill someone who's on a different hole on the course. I can imagine what it's like with people lined up. I see these people lined up giving these guys, and these are pros, but they're hitting the crap out of the ball. I can't believe how close some of them sit around someone teeing off, because it doesn't take much to that ball to go errant and go right into your dome.
So with a guy like Moody, I mean, he's tested, right? I know it's at the college level, but I mean, the Big House can't be an easy place to kick, right? Or anywhere there in the Big Ten, and he's got a coach. He's coming. Jim Harbaugh was his coach, right? I mean, there's a guy that if anybody's going to get in somebody's dome or at least build that confidence up, it could be Jim Harbaugh, right? We saw him as the 49er coach, but it's wild, guys. On the internet, right? You see just all this like, oh my God, Jake Moody. And I'm sure a lot of it has to do, like you guys have said, with the fact that they used a 3rd-round pick on a kicker. But when I talk to people, in real life, because I'm always sporting my Niner gear out in public. So anybody that has it on him was like, go Niners. And then we talk. And the last couple of weeks has just been like, hey, what do you think about the draft? People are excited about Jake Moody. At least I've talked to at least a dozen people that have been like, yeah, Jake Moody, hey, he never missed an extra point in college. He's the future, this and that. It's like, okay, all right. So the people are believing it, right? So at least, in real life they are. So that's important too, I think. The fan base needs to be behind you.
It is the real world. And I tell my kids all the time, people, it's, once you're 18 and you're out the house, they're not going to coddle you out there. I think the 49ers are a perfect example of that. Like, no matter who you are, you could be Brandon Ayuk. And I mean, for them to come out and say, well, if we had other healthy receivers, we wouldn't have played Brandon Ayuk as a rookie. And I'm like, damn, I thought he had a good rookie year. But Kyle and John, they are not going to coddle you. I think John does a better job of being a little bit more politically correct, even though he'll speak his mind and say what's going on. But I think he says it in a better way than Kyle is just straight, super blunt and upfront. And it's one thing, if you're talking to me and you're upfront, he says it to millions of people. And I wonder how tough sometimes that is on the players, because I haven't heard a coach consistently be as upfront as Kyle is on the status of his players and like his expectations for them. Usually that's something more like in-house. And you'll have a coach say, oh, hey, he knows he has to play better, et cetera. You'll have that, but he's just like, I don't know. He very, very, very upfront and very honest about it.
Croc, we compared Jair Tig Brown to Talanoa Hufanga a lot in our draft evaluations and watching his film. And Adam Peters, 49ers assistant GM, did the same, talking about how there were a lot of similarities with the evaluations of Jair Brown and Talanoa Hufanga just a couple of years ago. And one of them was the speed thing. And it was interesting because Adam Peters said, quote, I wasn't really upset that he ran a 4.6, basically because that made it possible for them to draft him in the third round, because otherwise he would have gone higher in the second round or whatever. They said they thought it was a second round guy that fell to the third round. And he was talking with Daniel Bullocks, 49ers DB coach, and they said basically a 4.6 can become a 4.4 when you have instincts and know what's going on and you anticipate and you have a high football IQ. And that's what Ji'Ayir is. So yeah, he ran a 4.6 at the combine, but our research and development department says his play speed was actually elite among the safeties in this year's draft. He was in the 92nd percentile in speed and acceleration on a down in and down out basis. And so we know the 49ers lean on the GPS stuff. So that's interesting that he came out with a 92nd percentile speed rating, even though he was 4.65 at the combine. And Croc, looking at the tape, we'd seen some times when he wasn't necessarily the fastest on tape, but just like what they're saying here, down in, down out, they're not talking about top speed necessarily. They're just talking about how quickly he's moving on an every down. Because some guys that run 4.3, they never even run 4.3 during a game because they never have that opportunity to do so.
Yeah, one of my buddies, we were just talking the other day, and he talked about how with a slow receiver, when you run a 4.7, he's like, well, you can be a slow receiver because, well, the DB has to run a 4.7 if you're running a 4.7. It's not like he can run a 4.3 and just outrun you and then you do a stop route or something like that.
That's a good point. If he's running 4.3 and you run 4.7, then that means he's not covering it.
I will say this on the speed thing, especially as it pertains to prospects. I always look for the what ifs, so you can find what's consistent. But if we're talking about how you are kind of stacking prospects up against other guys, you never know when you might need that. And we saw some plays where he needed to be a little faster and he just didn't have it. And I look at it a lot like a quarterback. You don't need a big arm 90% of the time, right? Like you can play the quarterback position without having a Josh Allen arm. But, several times a game, there will be certain throws where you probably could have utilized having that big arm.
Nice to have it.
And you probably, because you don't have it, don't attempt that throw, right? I think there's a lot of that goes on, and we'll never know, right? But he might see some, that's not my thing. I don't have that club, right? Yeah. So they can talk about the speed and down in, down out, and we saw that dude flies around. But there are going to be some times where you'll see something happen, and it won't be a lot, but it might be that one time where he needed to be fast, and he's not fast. But coming downhill and other things, terrific. He plays balls to the wall all the time, and that was something that we really liked about his game.
Croc, you said that Josh Allen arm. I think you meant that Sam Darnold arm.
Good point.
Or the Sam Darnold arm. You don't. And where I remember seeing this and where it popped in my head, I was watching Dak Prescott. Average arm, right? Not bad, not great, anything like that. But he tried to make this drive throw, and he just couldn't make it. And I remember thinking, you don't need a big arm until you need a big arm. And he needed a big arm on that throw, and he just didn't have it. And that's the same thing with speed. You don't need to run a 4.4 as a cornerback until you need to run a 4.4. You don't need to be fast as a safety until you do it. And that's why a lot of the faster safeties, they can do a little bit more. And then you can have a guy like Kyle Hamilton, who was drafted to Baltimore. He ran a 4.59 at the combine, and then a 4.71 at his pro day, was still drafted in the top 15, and he had a good rookie year. But watch how they utilize him. They're not going to ask him to do the same things as Derwin James and Minka Fitzpatrick or Jimmy Ward.
No, what club
on sorry, one more note on Jake Moody before we go here, guys. This one from Adam Peters, a story about what potentially got him drafted. First of all, remember the whole thing about the 49ers outbidding the Rams to get Christian McCaffrey at the trade deadline? Well, maybe we can thank the Rams for the Jake Moody pick too, because Adam Peters referenced the Rams. He said, quote, "I don't believe the Rams had a kicker, a punter, or a long snapper on their roster before the draft. So the 49ers knew they were bidding with some other teams. The Patriots, one of those 6 or 7 teams that didn't have a kicker or that could potentially have drafted a kicker in the 2023 NFL draft. But the thing that might have sealed it for the 49ers was when Brian Schneider, the special teams coordinator, worked out Jake Moody at the facility. They did this, last second field goal thing where the kicker, the holder, and the long snapper run out on the field, and they have to make a 55-yard game-winning field goal, right? They have to just run out, snap it, and kick it really quickly. And apparently they didn't really have a real long snapper, so it was just some random tight end that was snapping it to a punter they were working out who's being the holder. And then Jake Moody was making the kick. And the snap was bad, and the laces were in the wrong place, but Moody nailed it, 55-yarder, booted it like it was nothing, and that might have been what sealed it. So do you think that was telling of what kind of kicker Jake Moody is going to be? Do you like that last second kick tryout workout?
Just fighting through adversity. I love it.
Laces out.
Laces were in. He still nailed it.
Now, can an undrafted guy nail it?
Can Ray Finkel nail it?
That's true. Is he better than replacement? We'll find out. We'll find out if he's still around in a couple years. If he's around in 10 years, like John Lynch said, Niners will be doing cartwheels. If he's
or
the guy,
like Wisnowski. Wisnowski's going to be around when it's all said and done. How many years is he going to play for the 49ers?
And you know what's crazy about Wisnowski is he was an older prospect. He was 30 by the time he signed his second contract. Yeah. But for a kicker or a punter, that's not that big of a deal because you can play well into your 30s. Like Wisnowski's 3 years older, 4 years older almost than Christian McCaffrey. And he was drafted 2 or 3 years after him, I think. Wow. Pretty wild. All right. More on the San Francisco 49ers draft class, of course, coming up daily right here on Locked On 49ers with Croc and I. And, of course, the Winky Wednesdays will continue as well. Wink, thanks so much for jumping on with us once again.
My pleasure, guys. Dubs in 7.
Dubs in 7 coming back on those Lakers. Got to keep Lonnie Walker off the court. Croc and I back tomorrow right here. Locked On 49ers.